you guys for joining us for a special edition of the Sit Down with Malik Wright, presented by First Star Logistics. We are live from the First Star Logistics studio right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm joined by special guest, Ohio State legend Maurice Clarett. Maurice, thank you so much for joining me today on the show, my man.
Thank you all for having me.
Of course, my man. And want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. I hope that it was a great Thanksgiving. Appreciate you for making the time. Definitely had to get to talk to you, especially with the Ohio State Michigan game coming up this week. I know it's a big one, and I'm excited to hear who you got in the game. Although I'm pretty confident I know who you're gonna pick, man. But look, man, I want to talk about you. I want to talk about your story, right? I've been following your story for quite some time. I read your book, seen almost every interview that you ever did, and I was honored that you wanted to, that you were open to speaking with me about your story. So I want to start off with a little bit of a softball question. What made you, love football, get into the game of football?
Yeah, well, I think it was just a natural part of my childhood. I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, late 80s, I'm 83. So late 80s and early 90s was a large part of my childhood. Like I say all the time, I was fortunate to grow up with a neighborhood full of boys. So trying to find any sporting activity, football, basketball, track, racing in the street, or any sort of athletic activity, all those things were right outside my door. I didn't have to search for or go to some specialized camp or trainer for any of that stuff. And so I was thinking to myself, I think just that's where you find like your natural training ground for competition. You grew up with so many boys and it's competitive and young guys are coming into their own and you're trying to find a nickname and all that other stuff. So that's basically, I think, where my love for football or just most sports came from, just walking right outside the door.
I was watching one of your interviews and you talked about your mentality, right? You talked about your mentality and how you said, I want to be the best no matter what I'm doing, whether that's football or anything in life. I want to be the best. Now, some people may perceive that as cocky, right? I took that as confident. I took that as you have a self-belief in yourself, right? You believe that you've put in the necessary work that is going to pretty much pay off when you're doing whatever said action that might be. So I wanted to know in your own words, Maurice, what would you attribute your mentality to?
I just think it's simple. If you choose to invest your time into anything, you have the God-given right to choose what you want to become or what you want to do. And I don't see how anybody enters any action and they choose to be second place, third place, or last. And in the process of doing that, or in the process of developing that mentality, I was always clear and just conscious about wanting to be the best at whatever it was that I was doing. And I was also willing to pair it with the work. And so I think a lot of people feel the way I felt, but a lot of people can't pair the work ethic with it. They can't pair the discipline with wanting to be number one. Nobody says, hey, I want to go get the worst car that it is to buy. People typically want the best car, but they can't match the discipline or the work ethic to get what they actually want. Same thing in sport, same thing in business, same thing in sales. The same thing with the show. You just sit down with the show and said, hey, man, let me create the worst set. I'm saying? You created the best set that you can get. And I would like to believe that your hopes is to make it as big as possible. Yes. And if you weren't looking to do it or make it the biggest and best possible, I would say, why are you doing it? And that's my mentality towards everything. If I choose to engage in something and I really believe in it and I really am going to spend my life's force. And oftentimes I look at life like a video game, like an old school Mortal Kombat where, if you got hit and the power kept on shrinking down, I look at life like that. Every day you wake up, your power or your life force, it goes down. And I don't know who in their right mind would choose to be anything but the best that they can be. Now, you giving your best doesn't always mean that you're first, but it's the mentality. I don't know how you can go into anything any other way than I'm going to win. I'm going to be successful. You can have those expectations for yourself, but then also paired with, hey, man, it takes a huge amount of work to achieve or actualize or materialize what it is that I'm doing. So a culmination of that, I just always wanted to be the best, and I've never minded working without like time limits. I never said, hey, man, I'm only going to work hard for a year. And if this doesn't happen in a year, I'm just going to give up. I just always said, hey, man, whenever I get to where I want to go, I'll get there, but I'll keep on working until I get there.
Absolutely. Now, you said something interesting. You were talking about the mentality, man, and how you want to outwork people just the way you were brought up. Did you ever have anyone who tried to speak down towards that, so to speak, or tell you to limit your expectations? Because I know growing up, right, by being raised by a single mother, in my dreams, my visions and things that I want to talk about, especially in the African American community, I would say sometimes people try to put limits or expectations on, where you see your life going and the things that you want to accomplish. Did you have anybody or any friends, any family members trying to tell you, hey, Maurice, you're dreaming a little too big?
Well, they would never say it directly, but it will be indirectly, right?
Yeah.
Where if you say that you want to do something or to accomplish something, and there's no engagement from somebody, or there's no elaborating on how to help you get there, or there's no there's no interpersonal conversation with somebody else.
Right.
That's a form of somebody not believing in you, right? Or people choose to connect on whatever level, right? If I said, "Hey, man, let's talk about the Cavs versus the Warriors in the finals in 2016 or 15, whatever it was," you can get people to talk to you all day. But if we talked about achievement and doing something outside of the norm or something that somebody else hasn't achieved before, there wouldn't be any engagement. But the thought of them not engaging mainly would come from them asking, like, how is it that you believe that you can achieve that, or what makes you believe that way? You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
as I would begin to talk about, just think about this. There was nobody there was nobody significant who came out of Youngstown, Ohio, and thought that they can be the greatest player in the world. And when I told myself in high school I was going to be the best player in the world, I wasn't joking. I was just, hey, as I began to see more people and see more things, I just believed that I was different, or I had a different mentality, and that I thought I could achieve more. And so these same things have been going on just through life and in business and even what I do now. But I don't let that stuff sway me. And one thing I've always known was that I can control what I do every day, right?
Right.
And the more that I get abnormal results, and I can connect it back to me working abnormally and me working outside of the confines of what normal people do, it reinforces my belief into believing in yourself, speaking over yourself, speaking positively into yourself. All those things attribute to where I'm at now. But when you're younger, I think you let it get to you just because you don't have a bunch of life experience, right? So
Right.
somebody who you believe you look up to, be it a parent, be it somebody in the community, or just an older adult, you think that they know more. But most, and this sounds a little bit harsh, most people have given up on their own dreams, right?
Mm.
And they project
Yes.
what they've done or what they didn't do into your life based upon what they did and didn't accomplish.
Yes.
And you may have a harder discipline. You may have more fortitude. You may have more insight. You may have more humility, or your spirit for achievement just may be different. You may be able to listen. There's a lot of people. There's parents. Just losers. And when I say loser, I'm not talking about loser from a financial standpoint, but just bad character, can't listen to anybody but themselves, can't get along with people, poor attitude, poor communication skills, poor friend group, just a loser. You know what I'm saying? And and it's not until you start growing and you start having just honest evaluations with who influences you.
Right.
Just having, and I'm not here to beat any parent group up because my mother is phenomenal. But I knew at some point she couldn't guide me to where I wanted to go anymore. And that's not to speak down on her, but she nurtured me and brought me to a point. But the things that I wanted to accomplish, she wasn't the facilitator of that. You know what I'm saying? Or she couldn't advise me through that. And I had to go seek it elsewhere. Then there's people, coaches who, they can only take me so far. And then you have to find other people, who are doing some of the things that you want to do. And you have to let those people influence you and speak to your life. And sometimes those people, white, they're black, they're Russian, they're Asian, they can be anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you don't, if you close off your world, you'll stay like the group of people who you allow to influence you. And you'll become a loser too.
Maurice, I love what you're saying right now, because these are some of like the positive affirmations that I've often speak to myself. Often I often say to people, I started my own business back in 2018 when I was in my early 20s, and people, friends, family members were saying, hey, you can't do those things. And you have to realize, and I speak to a lot of young people and I say, a lot of people will project their own insecurities onto you. You cannot ask someone who's never been an entrepreneur what it's like to be an entrepreneur, or how should I attack this? How should I attack being an entrepreneur? And that goes for any profession and anything that you want to do. The person that can't comprehend what you're trying to do often goes the negative route, often says what can't be done, right? You even look at the word impossible, it still has possible in it, right? And I think that what you're saying is, I mean, we could have a whole, interview strictly about positive affirmations and things you tell yourself and the people you surround yourself with, so on and so forth. But I want to get to what made you choose Ohio State. Let's talk about that.
It was a couple different things. Just to put it in context,
Sure.
so Ohio State didn't offer me a scholarship. Ohio State, they had previously got three running backs in the class before me, and so I was equipped to go to, or committed to go to Notre Dame. And the year I was getting ready to go to Notre Dame, Bob Davie, who was the head coach at the time, he got fired. And so I was like, hey, I'm not going to go here because I didn't know who they were going to choose at the time. And Jim Tressel, he had won a ton of championships at Youngstown State. And me being from Youngstown, I knew who he was, and just the affinity that people had for him, or I had for him, and just what he had done for our town would bring us so much pride. And so many guys from our neighborhood had went and played for him that I had there was a reverence there for him, right? And so what ended up happening was I called down to Ohio State probably the spring going into my senior year. And I told him that I was coming, and he laughed and said, "Hey man, we didn't offer you a scholarship." And I said, "Hey man, after this year, you will." And it was just wanting to play for him. And as simple as it sounds, there wasn't any major recruiting. There wasn't any when I came to campus, I partied and lived it up, and got persuaded by guys on the team. It was me wanting to play for him. And I think just for any other kid, I think if you're from Ohio, or if you're from Kentucky, or if you're from Texas, every kid who plays football wants to play for the premier team for their state if they have the opportunity to. And so I wanted to go to Ohio State. And at that time, and, going into my senior year, I had put a ton of work in. And when I put all that work in, I was like, man, there's nobody who's going to be better than me. And I just kind of made it up myself. And that was my work ethic going into the season. I said, hey, man, I had seen the guys at Ohio State play prior to that. And I said, man, as a kid, I'm better than these guys in high school. And I didn't say it in an arrogant way. I just looked at them and looked at me, and I said, I'm better than them now. Right. And that's basically what I did. I said, hey, man, I'm going to Ohio State, and eventually, went down there.
Now, you became the first freshman running back to start at Ohio State. You put up record numbers, 1,200 plus yards, 18 touchdowns, went 14-0, national champion. You talked about, putting your mentality on the table several times in past interviews and things of that nature. Accomplishing all those things, what was your mentality like at Ohio State? What did your teammates perceive your mentality to be like? Because I could tell you, I know that sometimes confidence can scare people. I think confidence can sometimes make people feel, little, if you will. But, going there, saying you were going to do all these things, then actually going out there and accomplishing them and having great success. What did that do for what was your teammates' mentality? What was the entire, I guess, team's mentality?
It was fractured in a way until I did something right. So when you have somebody who's unproven coming in talking about what they're going to do, there's a few things. You have people who are a little bit older to say, hey man, I'm going to put this guy in his place, right? And show them that it isn't as easy as he believes it is, right? And then you have other guys who get sparked by it, because some people love just a brash, confident, boastful, hey, let's take the field and scrap a mentality, right? And then you have other guys who play your position who they get a little bit nervous because they have to deal with you every day. Right. And I'm a person that I used to watch Mike Tyson coming up, right? When I was a kid, Mike Tyson was like, he was bigger than any athlete that you can ever dream of, right? He was a heavyweight champion. He was rough, tough, and he could knock everybody out. And I remember when I was in high school, I heard him say something. He said everybody can compete in silence, but people can't compete openly.
Right.
And he was like, if I want, basically, if he wanted to beat somebody up or if he wanted to fight him, he'll put it out there, right?
Right.
So I always kind of took that and I said, man, if you just put yourself out there, if I say, hey man, me and you are about to compete, and I'm about to take your job. I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to take this. And I say it openly. You no longer are playing a mind game with yourself competing against me.
Mm.
We're putting it on the table. And now the metric or not the metric, what we're responsible for doing is showing up and competing every day. So I knew I had a great work ethic, and I'm speaking in regards to running backs. And I would get there before these guys to antagonize them. I would be the first one on the football field before practice, and then after practice, I would work. And I just knew that these guys didn't have it in them to take the workload, right? Because they had girlfriends and they wanted to party and they wanted to do every other thing that filled up their time other than train. And I just said, man, I'm going to antagonize people with just being there more than them, and they don't have the discipline to do that, right? When it came to the guys who were cheering for me and wanting to rally around this mentality, because Ohio State was just a regular, 7-5 team, 8-4. There wasn't anything special at that time. Those guys were looking for some brashness or a dog or whatever it was, and I got those guys to rally around me when I would play on scout team with the underlings, right? And then for the singers who were trying to put me in my place, I just said, hey, I'm gonna just go at these guys every day until they get it. And you had a hoot and holler drill. That was the first thing that I did. So I went out on our hoot and holler drill, and I asked to be paired against the All American guy at that time, Mike Doss. And I said, well, I want him. I don't want to go against everybody else. Just give me the top person. We'll figure this out, right? And from doing this and taking these brash approaches, like there's nothing to lose. If I lose in the hoot and holler drill and I get crumbled, I just go back to where I was at before, and that's where I started anyway, right?
Right.
If you don't corral your teammates and get these guys to rally behind you, if you don't lose, or if that doesn't happen, what do you really lose? You have 3 or 4 more years here, and then from a running back standpoint, you have 3 guys in front of you. So that's with anything. So I named it in the peril of football, but also with just the mentality of somebody may listen to this, man. What do you have to lose? And are you willing to put yourself out there if you're willing to work? I was willing to do that, and I was willing to tell people that I was going to do it because I believed in myself and I was, serious about what it was that I was doing.
Absolutely, man. I think how what you're talking about now and how you're explaining everything in detail. I think that for some kid out there that's listening, that's going to watch this, this could help you, through life, so to speak, especially through a young man's life. I think that these words of wisdom that you're providing, second to none. But I want to fast forward, right? You have success at Ohio State. You guys, you were the first freshman running back to start there, put up record-breaking numbers, 18 touchdowns, 14-0, national champion. How had your life changed, right, from before you accomplished all that success till, to now, right? You went on, you got to hang out with G Unit, you got to, you formed a relationship with LeBron James, things of that nature. So how did your life change,
Oh, it changed drastically. I went from just your typical guy who comes into a stadium to then going out for a season and becoming a household name across the nation. And with that, when you're just a gym rat trying to make it, nobody knows you. You walk around campus, nobody knows you. You walk through town, nobody knows you. Or if they know you, they don't know you for doing anything. They know about your potential, but you've not accomplished anything at Ohio State. And after we went out for a season, we hadn't won a championship since 1968, and then we go out and win one against Miami. It was a toast to the town. There was nothing that I couldn't have access to, be it women, be it clubs, be it just privilege. And so, in parallel to me having all that success on the field, I had a chance to live like a professional athlete off the field. Mm-hmm. And so, with that, you only have so much time in the day. And any time that you take away from your profession or from your sport and you fill it with something that's counterproductive or something that doesn't assist you, those things are going to start to show. And so stop showing up to class, start, hanging out with women more, started partying more, started hanging out, just being a college kid more instead of just focusing and keeping my nose down. And those were, I don't know, just the beginning remnants of basically what started happening in my life at that point. But it's just all just, excuse me. There's an old saying that your talent won't take you where your talent your talent can take you somewhere, but your character won't. If you don't have character, it won't keep you there.
Right.
And I was a prime example. Like I was a very talented individual, and I had world class athletic ability. But when it came to being to character as a human being and interacting with people, or just learning how to keep my head in the right place, I just didn't do a great job at that.
Yeah, so you talked about, the things that you sort of endured, right? I know the NCAA had investigated you
Mhm.
for taking money, things of that nature. Where, from a confidence standpoint, when you went through the suspension and things of that nature, and maybe you could, talk a little bit more about that. What do what was your confidence at when you did get suspended from the Ohio State University? And I know Jim Brown came out in your defense and things of that nature. But what was your confidence at? Because you strike me as a person that was confident all throughout your life, right? And then this was like probably the first, in terms of on the field type of thing where someone's
Mhm.
telling you, hey, you can't play. They're taking the game away from you. The thing that made you a quote unquote household name. Where was your confidence at? When
Honestly,
when you did, get suspended.
no, great question. So a lot of my personality are who I was widely known for was always associated with football, right? So
Yeah.
in regards to my athletic ability, the ability to perform, and the ability to do the thing that people love me for, like that didn't waver. Where
Right.
I started to have trouble, and I illustrate this everywhere because people sometimes aren't aware that you're a human being. You have all of these different facets and phases of you just as a person. And so when it came to just thinking through life and thinking through problem and thinking through stress, I wasn't equipped there, right? So I was still an immature kid in regards to life, right? So when you play football, a large part of your life and a large part of your decision making is made by coaches, advisors, teachers, and everybody trying to protect you so you can play a game.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of negative decisions, or you don't basically feel the impact of bad choices and negative decisions because you're typically insulated if somebody comes and saves you, right?
Right.
So when I was put into a situation where football wasn't on the table anymore, naturally this person who I didn't develop was the person who was brought to the world. So I didn't know how to deal with stress. I didn't know how to deal with not being able to be around teammates. I didn't know how to deal with not being able to play the game. I didn't know how to deal with just all of these things that you deal with basically when you're going through like a depressing and stressful moment, right?
Right.
And so my confidence was down, my self esteem was down. I started to realize that I even myself leaned a lot on just my athletic identity, and I just I didn't know who I was outside of that. And so, what do you start to do? You do things that make you feel good. You drink, you smoke, you artificially, and I say artificial like with so much emphasis, you artificially stimulate your mind and stimulate your body just for you to feel better about yourself inside of that moment. And so, when I wasn't associated with this achievement or running a touchdown of some sort, all that stuff definitely affected me. And that's I mean, a lot of times that's why you see a lot of athletes once they're done playing ball, a lot of guys become depressed. A lot of guys become lost. A lot of these guys become addicted to some drugs or alcohol, or they begin to get in like mindless behavior just to entertain themselves, just to try to artificially feel good because they're trying to replace something that football or basketball or soccer or some sport did for them for their entire lives, and they haven't developed themselves elsewhere. And of course, you have more. You have more awareness now. You have more people talking about it now. So you have more, what do they call it, like transition groups or
Yes.
life after football, more programs. You have more of that stuff going on now. But in 2003, this wasn't a thing. Nor was there a infrastructure set up for somebody who got kicked out of school for one person. You know what I mean? That was my situation. So just life stress. I was good for all the stress with football, but the stress of life, the stress of decision making, the stress of, am I making the right decision? That stuff got to me, and I didn't do a great job at handling that.
Again, we're talking with Ohio State legend Maurice Clarett and talking about his story. So you come back essentially to the game of football, right? You declare for the draft with your suspensions up, things of that nature. You go on to have a combine. It didn't work out the way, you probably anticipated, or scouts probably anticipated, because of the things outside of football you were doing. So talk to us through that, right? You wind up going to the Denver Broncos. What was your mentality, right? Your mentality at Ohio State is, hey, I'm going to put my mentality on the table. I'm going to take over. I'm going to be the guy. And you go to the NFL with the Broncos. What was your mentality there?
Yeah, no, I mean, stark difference. Always remember this. You will never get a result on the field or any platform that doesn't reflect the preparation or lack of, right? So all of this streams together. When I got kicked out of the sports, that's when, you go into this downward depression, right? You don't feel like getting up. You don't feel like working out. You don't feel like training more. There's no end in sight. You don't know if you're going to be drafted. You don't know what's going on. You don't know if you're going back to college. You're just like you're floating. You're floating in life, right?
Right.
And by the time I got to Denver, and remember I said earlier, how you identify and what you identify as is like probably the most important thing you can do as a human being.
Yes.
And so when I was a football player in high school and even in college, I was calling myself the greatest of all time, right? I was affirming to myself in driving behavior, and I was in line with my thoughts. My thoughts were thinking about the greatest of all time. My work ethic aligned with somebody who was the greatest of all time. When I got kicked out of sports, I was calling myself just this dude from the streets. You know what I'm saying? I was this gangster. I was the guy who was a gangster, right? So everything I did was a gangster. The way I interacted with girls, starting to get back into the streets, all the stuff that I did for the last 2 years. And so when I show up to the combine, that's a clear indicator that my preparation wasn't where it needed to be in order to, be everything to everybody, right? That was the first part, right? And so Denver thought that they could provide an infrastructure to allow me to grow. So they had, 4 or 5 running backs there, and they said, hey, man, we're not looking for this guy to come in and contribute day one, but maybe over a year's time we can clean him up and be in a professional environment in a year or two, getting back out there. But just where I was at mentally, I was so far gone. I was so far, I don't know, I guess removed from sports that I resented it. I resented getting drafted in the 3rd round. I resented going to the Denver Broncos. I resented not making money. And just like anybody else, your head and your feet need to be in the current space. And my mind was back on all the things that I missed and all the things I wasn't getting. My mind was just in a dirty place. And it wasn't until Denver tried to catch me a few times. They said, hey, man, you're out here in Denver. You're not socializing with the team. You're going out partying every night. You're hanging out with the girls. You're missing practice. You're doing everything but being a professional. And even when they would tell me that, no matter how serious they were, no matter how many times they set me down in the office, no matter how many times they tried to put me with a sports psychologist, it just didn't make sense. No matter who told me. It was John Lynch. It was Jerry Rice. It was running backs coach Bobby Turner. You had, an enormous amount of people, professionals, all trying to sit me down and say, hey, man, you can really play and you can do well, but I need you to take this serious. And I just never took it serious. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so with that being said, you can only give what you have. And if you don't have a lot, you can't give a lot. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. And in a professional environment, these guys are required to do your best and put the best product on the field and put the best teammate and Bronco in the community. And I don't blame them. Like, now running business, I wouldn't have employed myself. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't have wanted me around other people. You know what I mean? And if you're a cancer and a disruptor, you're not contributing. People will put up with you if you can contribute, right? Right. If you got a bad mood, and they'll get you out of there right after. But if you're not doing any of the above, then you won't get a chance to be a part of anybody's professional organization a long time.
Agreed. Well, Maurice, want to pick it up where we left off at here. You were talking about your tenure with the Denver Broncos. You said that you were talking about how, they tried to help you. They tried to create an infrastructure to make sure that you were successful in the National Football League. Where do you think it ultimately fell apart?
Just the 2 previous years I was out of football. So you need football for structure. You need football for guidance. You need football for discipline, structure, commonality of goals, something that's driving your behavior, preparation, all of that stuff over years, compounded behavior makes you or anybody else into a professional. And so, in the draft, you gamble, and you think that, hey, man, maybe I got somebody who has enough potential here, and maybe we can clean them up. Let's go ahead and clean them up and provide the environment around them. But there's just like in anything else, where your strengths can become your weaknesses. I'm a very driven person, right? I'm a very ambitious person, a very strong person, but that can be good in the right way or the wrong way, right? And so at that point in my life, I was going down the wrong way, but I didn't see the wrong way. It's not until you educate and you make aware, or you're made aware. Like once you get educated, you're made aware of like the impact of your decision making, right? And so when you're in your early 20s, you just don't see how, or you don't have the foresight to see how your decisions impact you or the collateral damage or whatever it is that you have going on. You don't see how that stuff plays out. And case in point with me, I didn't see how that was going to play out or how my behavior would negatively impact me in my time there. So it wasn't what happened in Denver. It was what happened the 2 years prior to me joining Denver. Denver was just the effects of an extended process of me making the bad decisions.
Yeah. Now, the Denver Broncos release you and you go back home to Ohio. And I know you said you started getting involved with, selling drugs and trying to keep up with the lifestyle and things of that nature. Talk to us about that. Like, sort of like, what was your mentality, right, going back to Ohio after you after you go to the NFL, you had success at Ohio State, things of that nature?
There's two parts. Well, the first part is that in order to be a contributing force of society, you have to have a skill, right? Yeah. And football is good for football. You know what I'm saying? And if you can't play football anymore, the essence of who you are will be presented to the world. And at that point, I didn't have any education outside of like the 9th or 10th grade. Other than that, I've been, shuffled through school or doing enough to stay eligible. So there was no skill or no special education that I had that I could basically bring to the world. Right. And as a result, I showed up exactly who I was, this young kid who was just aggressive and good at playing sports. And, I knew street activity because I grew up in the street and grew up around the street. My mother was the most wonderful mother in the world, but, we grew up in Youngstown. And so while she's at work, there's going to be so much you want to pick up from just the street, sure. And it's not intentionally. It's just what you're around, the neighborhood that you're in, and the things you learn to do. And so I went back and I got into that. And as crazy as it may seem, like the streets felt like very normal and not illegal. And, you go back and you do what you do. And to my hometown, I'm not known as Maurice Clarett. I'm known as Reese from the neighborhood, right? And so you begin to view yourself that way, but you don't realize how, once again, how your poor decision making will impact your life, all the things that you're throwing away. And so that was just a result of it. And so when I came back after that, I'll say this, there's a saying I heard over years that I think like it fits well. They say hurt people. So at this time, you're like in a low space in life. You hate how your life has turned out. You don't have I don't want to say commercial platform, but you have no professional environment to plug yourself into. And so you're feeling like dirt, I guess. And the next thing you know, the streets are there for you. And you go into the streets and you're interacting and you're making money and you're back to drinking, drugging, and you're back to doing all that. And basically that's what happened with my life. Right. And right after that, I touched a robbery case in downtown Columbus. This was New Year's Eve. Yeah. And 3-4 weeks after that, I found out my lady, she was pregnant. We've been together 18 years now, but, at this point, we're together probably 8-9 months. Yeah. And she's pregnant with a baby. So that's a lot. And just all of 2006, it was just the same thing, and that's why it's tough, when you run into a cycle of just bad decision making and one bad decision leads to another and you're chasing bad decisions. Yeah. It's a lot to get out of this cycle unless everything stops, you know what I'm saying? So, for sure. And that's basically what you're referencing to. And eventually that led to the high speed chase that I got into and eventually got arrested for.
And I was going to ask you about that. For the robbery that you committed, right? Mm-hmm. You actually turned yourself in. So, what made you turn yourself in?
No, they had a warrant out. So
Yeah.
the robbery happened in December 31st,
Yeah.
New Year's Eve 2005. I had a warrant out for my arrest. I turned myself in
Mhm.
3 or 4 days later.
Yeah.
And then after 8, 9 months later, the second thing I was talking about, that was 8 or 9
Right.
months later.
Yes.
That's when the high speed chase happened with all the weapons and everything. So two different
Yes.
incidents.
Yes. So for the initial robbery that you had and the warrant out for your arrest, you turned yourself
Mhm.
in. Yeah. So essentially, let's take us to you turned yourself in for the initial robbery that you
Mhm.
had, and then I believe there was a situation where with the what led to the high speed chase, so to speak. Is what I'm kind of getting at.
Well, so we had this was court was on Friday,
Hmm.
and this was like a Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday, and I thought it was a bright idea to try to, cause harm to the witnesses or victims of the case. And so I came down to Columbus. This was probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning, two, three,
Yeah.
4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And eventually, I call it like divine intervention, right? We all have plans of what we think are going to happen in life
Yeah.
and
For sure.
the things that we intend to do, but there's a different force that protects us all, either protects us from ourselves or protects the other people if somebody's coming to cause harm to them. And what eventually happened was I made a U-turn, and out of all the people in the world, or where he was sitting, a police officer. He was sitting in a Home Depot parking lot, 3 in the morning. There was nobody else out there but me and him. And eventually he put his lights on. And at this point, I know that I'm guilty of having weapons in the car. I
Right.
know that I'm out on bond from my previous cases. And what ended up happening was that I ran from the police and eventually they caught me. And after they catch me, whatever happened
Yeah.
after that happened, and
Yeah.
eventually went to the county jail. But just like in life, I know a lot of people hear it in cliche ways where they say,
Yeah.
God is redirecting me. But until you've been through something where you see that, hey, just on the front side, you look at it as being arrested as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, like it was a great thing for me in my life and where I was at. And I'm pretty sure the other people on the other end, they probably said, "Hey, man, I'm fortunate that this guy got arrested because had he
Yeah.
not got arrested, things could have turned out differently." So nothing I'm proud of, or
Absolutely.
I don't speak of it with any comedic tone to it
Right.
or any level of me being proud. But I'm fortunate that it happened because if that doesn't happen, I then don't start down a different path.
Absolutely. And no, I think it's important, to preface this, that we're this interview, right? This, Maurice being as open as he has over the years and even sitting down with me today is to hope to reach somebody. We're hoping to reach somebody. If we can just, help one
Mm-hmm.
person on this path, everybody deals with has their own struggles that they deal with. Everybody deals with certain things, but maybe someone that is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, headed down a similar path hears this and they turn their life around. So
Mm-hmm.
I love what you said. You said there is no glorifying, there is no comedic tone to this. Absolutely not. I do want to ask you though, Maurice, you know, the intention was to harm the witnesses, right? After
Mm-hmm.
you try to, I guess bribe them or
Yeah.
get them to pretty much go away, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
guess the question for you is you turned yourself in initially for the robbery you committed, and now for
Mm-hmm.
when the witnesses, for instance, what made you run from the police, right? You turned yourself in, and then yeah. To me, it's two different mentalities, right? It was one where it's like, okay, I'm giving myself up because there's a warrant out from arrest things of that nature, and then there's the all right, I'm gonna like I know you said in previous, hey, I thought I was a gangster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, what made you want to run from the police, or not even want to? What made you in that instant, in that action that you had? And I know you were probably had other
Yeah.
substances that probably contributed to that. But what made you think that was the best idea back then?
No, just to clarify too.
Yeah,
So when they put a warrant out for my arrest, they were
yeah,
coming to get me anyway for the first case, right?
right, 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 right,
So me turning myself in, it wasn't like, hey, I did it and you all
right,
are accusing me of it, and I just want to turn myself in. It was more like they're coming to get you anyway, right?
right, right,
So it was more that was the first part. The
right.
second part was I'm going to cause harm. And when I was out on bond for my first case,
Yeah,
I knew that once I got pulled over and the guy seen the weapons, that I was going to jail anyway. So you think that you can run away from the police,
yeah, yeah,
and you think that You actually think you're going to get away because you don't want to get caught, and you know that you're in the wrong, and that's basically what happened. I thought that I was going to get away, and believe you me, nobody ever. This sounds funny, but nobody ever intends on going to commit a crime and getting caught.
Yeah.
It's not what you plan on doing.
Right.
You plan to get away, and you want to get away, but that's not what happened. And so I tried my best to get away, but couldn't happen, and eventually caught up with me and basically took me to the county jail.
Right. Now I have a question for you. And I don't know if you've ever been asked this. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have anyone in your life when you were going through your tumultuous time, you got arrested, the whole 9 yards, you did 3 years, 11 months. Did you have anyone from your previous life? And when I say your previous life, I mean, when you were the talk of the town, right? Yeah. You were breaking records at Ohio State. You led them to a national championship, the whole 9 yards. Did you have anyone still in your life, still wanting to be a part of your life, when you were going through what you were going
through? I don't know, because I shut myself off when I was in prison towards the majority of people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not for any other reason than just me wanting to, I don't know if you call it just cleanse everything and everybody.
Right.
And I did a good job of that. So I don't know. I will say this. I'm lying to you. My professor, Bob Eckhart, but he was my professor in school, and we stayed in touch when I went to school. Bob Eckhart, the guy who wrote the book, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So he was a guy who was with me when I was prior to prison, when I was a kid at Ohio State, and then he was with me throughout all of the turmoil, and wrote me when I was in prison all the time, and we're still friends to this day.
Right.
And my family members, but there wasn't anybody else. But even when I went to prison, and after I went through my initial county jail stay, and when I started going to classes for therapeutic interventions, and when I started reading, not that I was against the people who was with me, but as you grow, things just naturally don't mesh well, right? And it's no difference than if you told me right now to go back to a third grade classroom. It's not that I would hate the third graders. It's just I don't fit in with the third graders. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think a lot of growth is like that. And just the front side of the county jail, and all of that isolation and all that reflection, and when you don't have drinking, and you don't have drugging, and you don't have partying, all that stuff is very entertaining, but it distracts you from the reality of your situation, right? And it distracts you from thinking about well-developed plans, or picking up the pieces of where you at and moving forward and going through life. All of that stuff, was away from me. So I had like a deeper look at myself and asking yourself, like, what are you going to do next? And, when you have a chance to get out of here, what are you going to do? And what are the steps you're going to take to turn your life around? And so I didn't have those things in place before, and me going to jail allowed the time for me to work on that stuff.
Absolutely. So you like I said, you spent 3 years, 11 months in prison. You get out on being a good inmate, things of that nature. What was your when you got out? I know we keep going back to mentality, but I feel like with you, mentality is such a huge, thing, as it is with me and with a lot of people. But you go out, you start a company, you get involved with public speaking, things of that nature. So what were the steps that you took once you got out of prison to start those things and sort of recreate your life?
I went back to, just in chronological order. I got out of prison in 2010.
Yeah.
I started out going to Omaha, Nebraska. I went out there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, ESPN, I shot a 30 for 30.
Yes.
And once they shot the 30 for 30, I began to go around speaking. I made myself some money from speaking. And then I said to myself that I didn't want to depend on speaking, because speaking is it's a lot like football in a way, where you're waiting on people to call you for an opportunity.
Right.
And I said, hey man, I have to get back out here and figure out life myself and build business. And so the first business I got into was transportation. Mm-hmm. And I got into this was when last mile delivery wasn't as big as it is with Amazon, right? Before, they used to broker it out to larger companies. and larger companies within subcontractor worked out, and that was the first place that I started. Then I took my MBE, my minority business enterprise certificate, and I got into packaging. So I started doing some packaging work with Cardinal Health and leveraged my minority status with them. From there, I would do public speaking and I would do transportation packaging. And from there, I got into mental health and recovery centers, and that happened.
The red zone.
And a lot of this stuff was the red zone. A lot of stuff had initially come from me just educating, reading, and pulling from stories of people who had either built business or who had done magnificent things in the entrepreneurial world, and me believing that I could one day do that stuff. And what ended up happening with the red zone, we had built it to a point where, we work with adolescents and adults with mental health and different recovery issues, and expanded across Youngstown and the surrounding areas. And the same thing with the adults in the substance use and drug use program. We house and render services to them, and had done well. But then I had another opportunity in some of the stuff that I do now. So we own, me and a few of my partners, we own the most, or we're the largest podiatry group in the state of Ohio. We own podiatry centers in different medical practices through the state. But all of that stuff, from the podiatry centers to other little miscellaneous businesses that I'm into, to transportation, to speaking, all of that stuff, just as there was a failed experience in Denver from the first 2 years of, or the 2 years prior to,
Right.
all this other stuff that you see now is a direct reflection of the preparation done every day to get myself together and to fulfill the vision that I have in my head for my life.
Right.
All of this stuff goes together, and I know it seems separate. I know it seems like football and after football, but it's just really life and behavior.
Right.
When you really look at it, it's life, behavior, it's decision making, it's preparation, it's character, it's fortitude, it's all of these things that make up everyday life. And you just set that mentality. It all is mentality. Mentality is the only thing that separates people.
Yeah.
And you just set that mentality and that work ethic and that discipline and that vision on different industries. It doesn't matter if you did television, it doesn't matter whatever you did, just the mentality and the vision set on different industries.
And knowing you can also accomplish anything that you want to. People will look at your story or, see it as the way someone's life may have started and say, I'm going to pigeonhole. That is who you are. When I talk with you, Maurice, I get the feeling that life is about the bounce back. I get the feeling that it's not about how you start, right? You can, doesn't matter if you go through tumultuous times or if you fall on hard, whatever the case may be, you have the ability today to recreate yourself, to reshape yourself and be whoever it is that you want to be. So that's the kind of the biggest thing that I'm getting. One thing that I was told growing up from my mom is never become a product of your environment. Never become a product of your environment. And even if you do, you have the means, right, to make it out. So I think this conversation is so important to have, because there are a lot of people out there today that might be going through a tough time that may think that there is no second half, right? We talk about the game of football, right? We talk about football is a game of 4 quarters, right? 2 halves. Maurice is in the second half now. He's in the second half. He took all the lessons and trials and tribulations that he sort of went through, and it made him into the person that he is today for the better. So I want to ask you a very distinct question, my man. You talked about it. I know when you were going through what you were going through, you had just had a baby, or you found out you had a baby on the way. And I know even now, right? We talk about the second half, and you have a 7-week-old baby. I got to ask you, how has fatherhood changed you?
It's impacted me. I think everybody's initial stand will be significantly.
Yeah.
But it's the first time that you're responsible for somebody else, right? I know it sounds so simple, but when you embrace the reality that you're responsible for someone else and understand how your actions influence them and how they'll view the world, and understand that they'll be a person inside this world that develops friends and opinions and a lot of who they'll believe that they can become will be coming out of you. It makes you become more self-aware, self-reflective, and more conscious of your behavior. And you just you start living for them. And I used to hear this stuff, man, and I just never had connection to it because I didn't have a father, right?
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. What do you mean you're responsible for somebody else? What do you mean that you feel responsible for this other thing? But that's it. I mean, these kids, I have three of them. We've been together for 18 years.
Right.
We have three kids together, and they all, at different points, just force you to improve yourself. Like if you care about your kids, if you care about how they come up, they force you to improve upon yourself so you can either lead the path, give them more resources, or make opportunities in life better for them, knowing that they'll be in society one day and they'll be contributing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm pretty sure if you talk to a lot of fathers, they feel this. It's a universal feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's the coolest thing. It's the purest thing. When you deal with kids, it's just pure. It's innocent. There's no intention behind it. It's not until they get up in life and start to um start to become older that they probably develop intention and they get on your nerves and work you. Like my daughter,
Right.
she's 16. It's not until they get older that some of the different stuff starts to take place. But no, it's a beautiful thing. Parenthood in general.
That's awesome, my man. I'm going to ask you another question that I'm not sure if you've been asked, but what would Maurice Clarett today tell young Maurice Clarett? What would be your advice?
Um, few things. Read earlier. I think anything that I'm talking to you right now,
Mhm.
reading is what ultimately changed my life. Continuing to read is what impacted my life and learning. That is the biggest difference from prison or pre-prison to post-prison. Just learning, making books your friends. I would have pushed literacy on the younger Maurice Clarett,
Right.
and I just think reading or going to conferences or having structured conversation about just how to improve yourself can work wonders. I would have been more conscious about telling myself or understanding the importance of just who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And how to take it and be harsh. You have to be harsh. No, no, it's very polite to be nice to people,
Right.
and be so like you have to white glove relationships, but I think totally opposite. You have to be harsh and have to be hard on yourself in regards to who you're hanging around with,
Yeah.
because you can politely turn into a loser.
Yeah.
You can in the nicest and most entertaining way, you can turn into a loser if you're around people who are not ambitious or. And I don't care, and it has nothing to do with money. Let me just separate that. Not nothing to do with money. I don't care if a guy was a ambitious artistic person
Yeah.
and he just took his art serious.
Mhm.
His mentality would be no different than the guy who wanted to make $100 billion, right?
Right.
It's the waking up with people who have purpose and zest and zeal, and they're ambitious and they want to exude positive energy and they want to encourage and they want to talk about how beautiful the world is and they want to talk about how grateful they are. It wasn't until I got older that I understood the significance of that. And now that I tell you, or even when you start to think like this, you can look at people and you can look in their eyes and you can see if they're so just weighted down and they're so depressed and they're so hard.
Right.
You can tell by subtle moments of people's looks. And I would have, if older Maurice could talk to younger Maurice, I would have explained that to him more because those things impact you, man. And making sure that you choose the right mate. You don't need don't need 1,000 girlfriends. You don't need to
Right.
stick your penis into 1,000 people. You know what I'm saying? You can find one woman that you can build your life with, and it's not just that you're a man and you won't find other women beautiful or whatever they are. There's beautiful human beings in general, right? But it's to say that, hey man, one woman is enough for me, and I can build a life with her, and I would get more into that. And those would be three pieces of advice that I would give to younger Maurice.
I love it, man. I love it. Again, this is one-on-one interview with Ohio State legend Maurice Clarett as we talk about life beyond the game, life beyond football. I feel very, very blessed to have the opportunity to have spoken with you today, my man. Your story is truly inspiring, having known a lot of people who have not come out for the better of, certain circumstances in their lives and things of that nature. And even knowing, people who were involved in the world of athletics and they didn't know what to do when it didn't work out for them. So I'm certainly going to be sharing this with them. I hope that this message can just reach, one person. I think I would also encourage, Maurice talked about reading, but I would encourage people to read his book, One and Done, how my life started when my football career ended. It truly is a fascinating read. Maurice, it's been absolutely an honor to talk with you. I appreciate you for joining me in the First Star Logistics studio, making yourself available, and just having this open and honest conversation and a dialogue that I think needs to be happening. But before I let you go, before we actually end this, I've got to know. Ohio State takes on Michigan this week. What's your prediction? Who you got?
Yeah, I think it's going to go one of two ways. The first way is that Ohio State jumps on them so fast because they can score a lot, or it becomes a blowout because Michigan can't pass. Michigan's a tough team.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say tougher, but they're tough. And if they play them as tough as they did last year, it could be trouble for Ohio State. But my hopes is that Ohio State jumps on them fast enough and uses Michigan's weakness against them because they can't pass very well, and put them in a situation where they're forced to pass, knowing that they can't. They win. But the second way of that is that if Michigan makes this a dogfight like they did last year, and they move those guys around up front, believe you me, aside from C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. and all that other stuff, the guys to watch are those interior guys. Because if you can't control the line of scrimmage, then it can become a long day for Ohio State. And those are the players that I'm watching, because that changes the dynamic of the game. They'll try to keep C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison and those guys and Trevion on the sideline, and that's how they try to win. So I don't know. I'm a little I'm anxious and ready to look forward to it, because I care more about the interior play than I do about the other guys. The other guys will be fine. But you based on what happened last year, I know that we need to get that right in order to win.
Right. So it starts in the trenches. I'm certainly going to shoot you over a text when Ohio State wins, because I'm predicting an Ohio State victory.